Secret Stone? Demon King? What if there's another tale of the Imprisoning War to be told? In the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, we kept hearing about the Imprisoning War throughout the game. What if there's going to be an actual game that just tells us about these events in full? In other words, something very similar to what we saw with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, how they told us more about the past of the Great War surrounding the Calamity. But this time it would have to do with the Imprisoning War that was told to us throughout all the flashbacks and Tears of the Kingdom. Could a Warriors game like this be on the way? And if so, what are the story implications? Or if not, what other Warriors game might be on the table instead? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and today we are talking about the possibility of the Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War and how that might work out, and if not, what we might get instead. But before going forward, let me point out that we are currently aiming for a goal of 40,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So let's first talk about the possibility of us seeing another Warriors game. Basically, we see Warriors games come out pretty much every year, sometimes more than one Warriors game per year. And they come in different forms. You have the Dynasty Warriors games, you have the Samurai Warriors games, you have the Orochi games, and then you have all the spin-offs like Persona Strikers, Fire Emblem Warriors, Hyrule Warriors, there's a whole bunch. And throughout the Switch era, in terms of Nintendo-published Warriors games, there's been quite a few. In 2017, we saw Fire Emblem Warriors. In 2018, we saw Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. In 2020, we saw Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and in 2022, we saw Hyrule Warriors 3 Hopes. So could there be another? Well, based off the pattern we've seen throughout the Switch era, we don't go more than 2 years without another Warriors game. So possibly we could see another in 2024. And considering that the second half of 2024 currently has yet to have been clarified by Nintendo, and there's all the talks of Switch 2 coming out early next year, and this idea that Nintendo's saving a lot of their bigger titles for next year, what could fill up the second half? Well, a spin-off title like another Warriors game, as we've gone throughout the Switch era many times, seems like a decent bet. So then, if that happens, what's the likelihood that it's another Zelda-related Warriors game? I would say fairly high. The Zelda Warriors games sell pretty well, so it's a strong seller. It would excite some of the fan base. And it would be interesting to see, especially because there's still a fairly sizable audience that wants to learn more about the world in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. After Breath of the Wild, there was a lot to be said about what happened in the past. And so what happened? Well, we got Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, where they told us about the Age of the Calamity. And now with Tears of the Kingdom, there was so much talk about this war in the past, the Imprisoning War, and there's a lot of conversations and thoughts about what happened then. So maybe it might make sense to have another Warriors game that tells us about the Imprisoning War. It is certainly a solid argument that can be made. As I've said in the past in prior videos, me personally, I don't necessarily need there to be another Warriors game, and I'm not really pulling for this, but I'm not going to lie, I think it does make sense from certain perspectives, so we are talking about today, and I do think it's interesting. Because as a Zelda fan, and more specifically a Tears of the Kingdom fan, there is a lot of lore potential with a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War. For example, in the flashbacks, we saw that Ganondorf had 2 different attendants, and from what we can understand of their appearances and their garments, they very clearly are a version of Kotake and Koeme, the witches we initially saw in Ocarina of Time. But these are younger versions of them, possibly the very same ones or just an incarnation. So with a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War, we could see these characters. We could see them actually have some voice dialogue. We could learn if they are just another incarnation of these witches or the same witches, just younger forms of them. And if that's the case, that has huge implications for the timeline and the setting for the Imprisoning War in Tears of the Kingdom. So that would be interesting to see. But going beyond the witches, there's also Ganondorf himself. I feel like we could have learned more about Ganondorf and his circumstances and what led him to his attack on Queen Sonia and Zelda and Rauru. I think there could be a lot said there. If we look at Ganondorf in the Wind Waker, he seems to have more depth, he seems to have more reason to be doing the things he's done, it would be interesting to see some of that in a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War, more characterization for this epic iteration of Ganondorf. But then beyond that, it would also be amazing to learn more about the Zonai. Were there really just two? Was it really just Rauru and his sister? And what of the legacy left behind Rauru and Queen Sonia? Queen Sonia speaks on how Princess Zelda, someone far into the future, shares a blood relation with her and Rauru. And so that implies that they had children, their legacy was left behind. Could we see details about them? Could it perhaps give us some clues as to exactly what's behind the hero's aspect that we can find later into Tears of the Kingdom, or that ancient hero from the tapestry in Breath of the Wild that many people think is connected to the hero's aspect? If this game were to happen, I think there's a fantastic chance we could get some interesting details like this. Because that's kind of how it worked out for Age of Calamity. We got a lot of characterization for many people in the past, and we got to explore areas that were in complete ruin in Breath of the Wild, like Castletown for example. So I'm definitely excited for these possibilities, but something that should be noted is that Age of Calamity, while it was overseen somewhat by the Zelda team, it doesn't fit into the same timeline as Breath of the Wild. Some people like to argue it's not even canon. I just like to think of it as a different timeline, a completely separate timeline from the main timeline, so if that isn't canon, then I guess that's just how it is. But when it comes to a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War, they don't necessarily have to steer away from the timeline, but it would be interesting to see how the scenario might play out, because they could simply just share with us more of the experience that Zelda had in the past that was told throughout the story of Tears of the Kingdom. But the problem with that is that the main character, Link, was not there. So do we simply just not play as Link? Or do they do something different where it's another time in the past where Link is a part of it? Or could it be that something that wasn't brought up by Zelda throughout Tears of the Kingdom was that there was another version of Link during that time? Could we see another hero in this game? Or would they simply just resort to some sort of time travel tomfoolery to get Link in there? There's certainly a few different ways they could go about doing this. But the overall point is that I think it would inspire some intrigue, and a big part of the Zelda fanbase would be interested in this. From what we've seen in several interviews, there are no plans of DLC or an expansion to Tears of the Kingdom. And there's also no intent to continue following this world. The next Zelda game is going to take place in a different point in the timeline with a different version of Link and Zelda and Hyrule, or wherever it takes place. So if we don't get a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War, or some other kind of spin-off like this, we're probably not going to learn any more of this version of The Legend of Zelda. So I think this would be our best chance. And 2024, timing-wise, really fits. But as I brought up earlier, I'm personally done with the Hyrule Warriors games. I'm sure there could be another one down the road, but I feel like we need a little bit more of a break. If there's going to be another Warriors game, maybe it might make sense to go in a different direction. Now, we've already gotten a couple different Fire Emblem Warriors as well, so I'm not asking for another Fire Emblem Warriors game. But what about a Warriors game for another Nintendo series? What Nintendo series would fit really well? Some people might think it would be funny to see Mario Warriors with Mario just jumping on a whole bunch of Goombas, like thousands of them. That would be kind of interesting, but I feel like it would get old pretty quick. A Nintendo series that I think actually fits the Warrior style quite well would be a Xenoblade Warriors. Right now, we're not sure on what we're going to see next from the Xenoblade games, but there's definitely more that can be shared. There's a lot of different wars that took place throughout the Xenoblade series, so take your pick. They could easily create several different Xenoblade Warriors games, but focusing more on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, considering that in 3 there's a merging of worlds, it's the perfect story excuse to bring in all sorts of characters from all of the different Xenoblade games into one world and one war, and tell this story. I think I would actually prefer Xenoblade Warriors because we haven't seen this before, and I'd be curious to see what sort of Xenoblade mechanics they implement into the Warriors formula to make it more interesting and feel more like something of the Xenoblade series. But then also this would be another opportunity to perhaps grow the Xenoblade franchise just a little bit more, so more people can come to love this series. So that's what I'm personally pulling for, but if we get a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War, I'll give it a try, or at least I'll pay attention to it and seriously consider it. But of course, there's also the possibility that we don't get any kind of Warriors game in 2024. But what do you all think? Do you think another Warriors game is on the table? Do you think it could be a Hyrule Warriors Imprisoning War? Do you think it could be a Xenoblade Warriors or something else? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.